I was sent the $1,500, £1,400 new FiiO R9 to try, and since I've got the R7 already, I thought this would make a great comparison video. Also, my thoughts against other streamers. I'm not going to go into all the features in this video, since these streamers actually share commonality in operation, so I'd recommend first checking out the R7 video before you get into this one. The R9 has clearly been designed to be used upright with its Android operating touchpad screen to reduce widthways desk occupation, but acts as a hub for headphone desktop streaming. But that shouldn't necessarily cast it out for hi-fi use. Admittedly, there is no capability to turn the screen into landscape mode when you're navigating the menus, which kind of casts it out for use in a hi-fi rack horizontally. And I say that you shouldn't necessarily cast it out because I used the R9 with the hi-fi emblazoned FiiO PL50 linear power supply like I did with the R7, and it together with this power supply slightly improves sonically on the Eversolo DMP-A6, as you would expect it to, being double the price of the Eversolo when you include this power supply. You can only get the R7 in rather plain black and white finishes, but the R9's case comes in this nice monolithic bi-colour black and silver. The R7 has a display of 720 lines of horizontal resolution in a 5-inch screen, whereas the R9 now goes to 6 inches and 1080 lines of horizontal resolution. And when you put them side by side, you do notice the extra definition and the vividity of the colours. I actually looked at this screen compared to my old iPhone 12 mini, and I'd say this screen is the improver, so that gives you the kind of reference here. You also get these nice metallic embellishment strips around the edges of the case that really set it off, and these lighting accent strips that run on the front face and also on the top. You can change the colour of those and the lighting effects. And like the R7 too, you can do that with these two accent strips around the dials at the front. The R9 uses two S9c Pro DAC chips in dual mono mode, much like the Eversolo DMP-A6's dual design, in contrast to the R7 that uses a lesser spec DAC chip in single DAC stereo configuration. The headphone amplifier section has been upgraded with an 8-channel THX 788 Plus setup, which is double the number of channels compared to the R7 and gives the R9 a whopping output power of 7,300 milliwatts into a 32 ohm load out of its front XLR socket, and which is double the power of the R7 into, or out of rather, the same socket and load. There is some slight reorganisation with the rear connection panel, although I would say I don't like the way they've actually put the USB audio output next to the Ethernet port, because if you've got fat cables you have to angle your USB cable in, and obviously that could damage the socket. But there is now an interference reducing ground loop switch. If you set it to ground, then the internal PCBs are connected to the outer case, and in lift mode the opposite. Of most note though are these two HDMI sockets. One is an ARC input from your TV, and if your TV doesn't have ARC, you use the other socket as an input, and then the socket normally used for ARC acts as an output to send the audio and video back to your TV through the R9. You'll notice in the menus that there are two additional HDMI input mode selections. The benefit of HDMI ARC or audio return channel for TV 2-channel hi-fi type use is we can plug all our sources like PlayStations or Blu-ray players into our TV and then route one HDMI cable from the TV to our hi-fi system, in my case from my Panasonic TV port 2. This is sort of aside to the normal terminology and use of HDMI ARC cables having multi-directionality. In 2-channel hi-fi systems, we're simply concerned with passing the audio on to our system via an HDMI cable. But annexed to that, in TV ARC connections, the TV takes control of the outgoing volume signal so that you can use your TV's remote control to control the volume of the analog outputs of the FiiO, much like you can do the same with a Bluesound node and its ARC connection. And this avoids the need for using a digital optical connection from your TV to your hi-fi system, such that you're having to control the volume on your TV and control the volume on your hi-fi system and try and match the two, which can be a bit of a faff. Sorry if you know about this already, but I'm explaining it because HDMI ARC is so very badly explained on YouTube. I would say though, having said all of that, that I actually couldn't get the volume control to work with my Panasonic GZ2000 TV, which FiiO told me is to do with a software compatibility issue that they're currently working on. The R7 is remoteless, but with the FiiO R9 comes the basic RM3 Bluetooth remote control for rudimentary features like play, pause, skip, volume. But one really neat feature of it is the little mouse button, such when you engage that, a mouse pointer comes up on the FiiO screen, and then you can use the remote control like a Nintendo Wii to sense hand movements to move the mouse pointer. I don't think it's going to be particularly useful if you're up close to the unit, because you're just going to be operating the touchpad screen normally. And maybe though you might be using it if you're sitting on a couch and you're operating the screen remotely, but then you're going to need to have really good eyesight to see it. So I think the use of this feature is somewhat limited. You can interface the R9 with network attached storage drives from within the FiiO Music app that comes pre-installed. And like the R7, you get 64 gigabytes of internal storage, such that you can download music to apps like you can on phones, which is quite quirky and unique, a feature of the R9, and it's shared with the R7 as well, obviously, because it has the same functionality. I doubt though, having said that, that you're going to be using this functionality, because obviously most of the time you're going to be using the R9 online. But worth mentioning again is the fact that FiiO's operating system avoids Android sample rate down conversion, where streamers like Cambridge Audio's CXN100 only have a few embedded services. It essentially means that those that aren't embedded into the Cambridge's own app, you're limited by AirPlay and Chromecast ceilings, so 16, 44.1 and 2496. That's obviously assuming you don't use software like Roon. But this means that if you can access any Android app via the Google Play Store, the app is available on the main screen, and FiiO's Applications app, which is a sort of select list of music streaming applications, then you can access any music service at bit perfect resolution, which gives this FiiO big flexibility. Another unique feature is that if you're, say, playing through the Tidal app and you want a Chromecast or AirPlay to a Chromecast or AirPlay enabled device, like maybe a Wii Pro Plus that I've got, you can use the R9 screen as a controller to send the streams on. Now, streamers like Bluesound Node or Eversolo DMP-A6 don't support Chromecast, but I don't know many streamers that have this functionality to stream within a streamer to send music on, and that's bound to have some uses and gives this streamer flexibility too. In the same way, you can load the Roon Remote app onto the R9 and use it as a controller, but still send streams to the R9 as an endpoint. So it's like a controller within an endpoint. This was a feature that I really liked on the R7 because it avoids the need for having an extra tablet or phone with you at your desk whilst you're using Roon on it. It's like a phone, but it doesn't make calls. There is also this very neat feature called FiiO Cast, which came out in November, that enables you to cast the R9 screen to the FiiO control app on a tablet or phone, and then mirror the touchpad capability of the R9 screen, much like with Eversolo products that do that. If you select the resolution connection option or latency connection option, both of those I found did lead to some breakup in moving images, especially when scrolling on an iPad screen, although when the image is static, you don't get any of that. Annoyingly though, each time you use this feature, you have to jog the FiiO Cast app on the device before you can go into your app on your tablet and turn it on. With Eversolo, you don't actually have to do that. You just go into the Eversolo app, hit the cast button, and you're going straight away. That's definitely something that FiiO could look at improving and looking at how Eversolo do it. Since I did my R7 review, FiiO have brought out an equalizer app. It's available on the R7 and R9, and any new R9s will have it pre-installed. You have to have firmware update 1.0.4 to get it. And if you do the firmware update, by the way, it comes pre-configured on the main screen. You don't have to add it as an app. It's basically enabling this R9 to output any EQ corrected app, and it acts as a front end, so all apps will go through it. It's useful to the extent that you can change music presets. There's a graphic EQ and also a parametric EQ. It's only a one-band parametric EQ, which, to be honest, I didn't find too problematic because you can use it in conjunction with the graphic EQ, and if you do it that way, it seems to be flexible enough. And considerably more flexible and without any of the bugs of the DSP EQ plugin that's available on Volumio 3 for Volumio Primo and Revo streamers, which similarly allows DSP EQ corrected audio streams of embedded services, but to reiterate my point, fewer of them because the R9 allows you to access any Android app. This has to be a big selling point of the R9. I don't have any similar price desktop streaming headphone amplifiers to compare this R9 to, so I can't make any direct comparative assessments. But with my 32 ohm Hi-Fi Man Aria Stealth planar magnetic headphones, comparing the R7 to the R9, I did find the R9 is less sibilant without the EQ setting on. It's got more depth to recordings and a greater sense of refinement in its overall presentation, and you also notice, as another main trait, tauter bass rhythms and more defined bass. The PL50 linear power supply is, I found, essential with the R7 in hi-fi use, not so much in headphones, and you don't really notice it much with headphones. You can use the rear switch to flick on and off the power supply to see what the changes bring. I covered that in my R7 video. With the PL50, the R7 isn't the prospect of the Eversolo DMP-A6. Again, I covered that in the previous video. But now, this PL50 power supply does improve sonic performance both with headphones and in hi-fi use. I mainly found an increase in muscularity of bass, bass mass, and the way that bass sits within the overall staging of music. In hi-fi use and used alone, the R9 just about shades it to the Eversolo DMP-A6 for me, but the change is very small, so I wouldn't go out rushing to buy the R9 if the consideration is on sound quality alone, if you've already got the Eversolo. The R9 has a thicker set bass and a bigger soundstage to the Eversolo's more open presentation with resolution in the mid-range and being a transiently dynamically more capable performer. But once you add the PL50 power supply to the FiiO, it changes again and comes alive, better dynamic transients again, and also with more depth to recordings. It is a slight audio upgrade with the PSU, admittedly with diminishing returns as you spend more in the mix, But these products, in a sense, the Eversolo and the R9 aren't comparable, like the R7 isn't comparable really with the Eversolo because of the headphone outputs that you've got, the desktop use, and obviously features like HDMI ARC, which the Eversolo A6 doesn't have. With the Hi-Fi Man's balanced and unbalanced connections, I preferred the sound quality of Aune's Class A S17 headphone amp used with their S9c Pro DAC that I've still got, compared to the same outputs from the R9. The S17 is a Class A amplifier, as I've just said, but it's not Class A sounding. It sounds very Class AB and really nice and spacey, delicate and nuanced. In comparison, the R9 is a little bit harder in these areas, but the Aune combo is 200 quid-ish cheaper than the R9, but obviously it doesn't have any of the streaming features. So it's a case of you pick your features, you pick your compromises. The R9 is a good product, and its talent obviously lies as a touchpad desktop streaming amplifier for headphone and hi-fi use. Obviously I don't have anything to pitch it against, to reiterate, so I can't really comment upon its value against other competition, although I would say it does seem to be at this point in time quite a unique type product with the R7, but certainly against the R7 I think it substantiates its price. Granted, law of diminishing returns in the mix, i.e. the more you spend you get more, but you get less of more. I hope this video has been useful. Please remember to comment, like and subscribe, and see you soon in the next video.